Fish on First Live is presented by About the Fans. We've partnered with them this season on a brand new merchandise collection featuring t-shirts, polos, hats, and other accessories that Marlins fans will absolutely love. Head on over to aboutthefans.com to shop the FOF collection. Use our special coupon code FOF10 to save 10% off your order. Enter code FOF10 at checkout to save 10% and continue supporting what we do over here.
This is Griffin Conan.
This is Xavier Edwards.
This is Liam Hicks.
This is Dave Myers, and you're watching Fish on First Live.
Fish on First Live, 1 week to go in this Marlins season, and we're not even full screen for this one because we are scoreboard watching in the final week of the 2025 regular season. It's not for draft position. It is for the National League wild card spot. The third and final spot is still a mathematical possibility for the Marlins. They've completed a perfect week, sweeps of the Rockies and now the Texas Rangers. And we are breaking it down, presented by About the Fans, promo code scrolling across the bottom of the screen. I am Eli Sussman with Isaac Azut, Alex Krutchik, Kevin Barral, checking in on the heels of another highly contested game that wasn't all that pretty, but the Marlins pull it out, not getting a ton of style points, but this is one of the hottest stretches that this franchise has ever had. They are 10-1, if you zoom out a little bit, 10-1 in their last 11 games. And as Kevin famously said a couple of years ago,
the vibes are high, and that's the way I would put it.
They are playing with house money already this deep into the season, but trying to chase that impossible dream of making it into October. Isaac, how can you even wrap your mind around the fact that this team is still in it with 6 games left in the season?
It feels like it's been a tale of 2 different seasons. The Marlins got off to that dreadful start where rock bottom hit probably in June when they were swept by the Colorado Rockies. And then they go on this really hot stretch leading into the deadline. They sweep the New York Yankees coming out of the deadline. And you're saying, uh-oh, holy shit. And then they really sort of level out a little bit. And then we think, okay, it's time to start thinking about next year. The Marlins, even basically the way they managed the games following that series, almost started making that clear. And then here we are in early to mid-September. And the Marlins are 4 games back of the third wild card spot. Sweep the Rockies for a little payback. They sweep the Texas Rangers, effectively ending their season. So many things had to go right for Miami to be in this situation. They had a lot of help from the New York Mets, who basically collapsed, and for the first time since April 5th, they do not control their own destiny. So it's been you got to give credit to both sides there. And Miami's got a really tough test here. You could say that Phillies don't really have much to play for, but they do go to Philadelphia for 3 tough games at Citizens Bank Park. And then the Mets, who really just feels like they have their heels against the wall. They come to Miami for the final 3 games of the regular season. It should be a lot of fun. But no, there's no realistic way that I can wrap my head around how the heck this is happening, because it's just surreal. And now all of a sudden, I think it was 2 days ago, the Marlins decided to start calling pitches from the dugout. It's a random time to do it. So they say anyway.
Yeah, that is a perfect transition, Krutchik, because I know you're paying close attention to that development, which started on Friday. This is the first series where 100% of the pitches called from the dugout. As far as I can tell, there was a little bit of a dress rehearsal on Wednesday in Colorado, but this is when they fully made that change in a way that no other major league team does, a way that took a lot of public criticism coming into it, and the way that they are essentially delegating that responsibility to the coaches instead of the catchers, but won pretty well, about as well as they could have expected. That first game allowed just 1 run in the first 9 innings, and then today just 2 runs. Yesterday allowed just 3 runs against a desperate Texas Rangers team. So, like, for people that didn't know there was a difference, they probably wouldn't have been aware that anything unusual was going on. But for a team that needed to win every single game to even stay in it, they throw this curveball, no pun intended, into the mix, and it worked out beautifully. They pitched extremely well this weekend.
Yeah, for the most part, it looks like a pretty smooth process. There's only really two things that stood out to me in a negative way, which was, it happens even when coaches aren't calling pitches from the dugout. In the ninth inning on Friday, Liam Hicks was kind of like giving the signal to hurry up to Alone Likman in the dugout. And they almost got a pitch clock violation, but then Jake Berger, the hitter, for some reason called a timeout of his own. With like 5 seconds left. And if he had just waited, he would have been awarded a free ball. And then today, Yuri Perez got hit with a pitch clock violation in large part because they couldn't get the signal in time. Other than that, everything else seemed pretty smooth. I mean, you could nitpick certain things. I mean, the Michael Peterson home run to Rowdy Tellez on Friday night, some people were saying, too many cutters being called. I think that I'm hesitant to criticize that too much just because you don't know what the exact scouting reports say on these guys. Usually Peterson throws, it's like 55-45 between the fastball and the cutter, and it was kind of inverse on Friday. He was throwing a lot of cutters, but again, you don't know what the scouting report says on these hitters that they're facing. Maybe they are weaker against cutters typically. Just a possibility. I don't know, but that was really like the only blemish from this whole series. Everything else looked pretty good. Starting pitching looked good, and relief pitching looked really good. The game that I personally covered on Friday and wrote the recap for, Lake Bacher and Cade Gibson delivered the game to the 10th inning, or to the 10th inning, and everything looked pretty smooth. And didn't notice, at least on the cameras, a whole lot of shake-offs and second opinions.
Yeah, there's an example right there of how this works, where as soon as the previous pitch gets delivered, the catcher looks over to the dugout for the signs, and Liam Hicks had that one situation where he's like, give me the sign, give me the sign, give me the sign. And they got bailed out of that. Then today there was one pitch clock violation that they were able to overcome and didn't ultimately make a difference. I think Yuri had it while he was in the game, where it led to an automatic ball because they didn't decide on a pitch in time. So that's just one little consequence of it. But other than that, yeah, you wouldn't really know one way or the other.
Regarding
The
what
other
Coach
thing as
said
well-
about, sorry, Coach. Regarding what you said about Peterson, though, that pitch call for Rowdy Tellez, it's been like, obviously his fastball is incredible and it plays really well late in the season now too. And there was a time where I forgot which at bat, I think it was against Toronto in that series, where he was just throwing fastballs right by hitters, and then for some reason with head 0-2, he wouldn't just go back to the hitter. He was throwing cutters in weird situations. So I wonder how different the coach is calling is from when Hicks and Augustine were calling pitches anyway, because I assume they're pretty aligned anyway. I don't think there's a huge difference or discrepancy with, the sort of strategy they go pitch wise. But yeah, that was when I looked at that, when I saw that pitch go over the fence, I was like, oh shit,
Yeah,
that's going to be one that we circle.
I will say, so admittedly, I haven't looked at the player breakdowns for Saturday and Sunday, but I know that on Friday, Cade Gibson and Lake Bacher and Jansen Junk, they were throwing their usual repertoires, their usual ratios of pitches. So at least for those three guys, everything looked to be pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is right in the middle of that picture. That is Leichman, the assistant pitching coach at the bottom, for those that don't recognize him. For a guy that would be almost completely anonymous until just a couple of days ago, which is funny that they kind of made a big point of emphasizing that he was the one sending the signals in that situation. I wish Kevin was still on with us, because specifically, shout out to George Soriano and how he did in this particular series. He ends up closing out this final game because of how heavily used several other relievers were in this series. And then on Friday, he's the one that pitched 2 innings in extras to win that one as well, including one where I think it was tied heading into the bottom of the 11th, and he had no margin for error and he got through it. I also wanted to expose myself because it was right before this series that I pointed out that I don't get why he's on the roster. He's had a terrible season, and people are very much aware of that. An ERA entering this series that was north of 9 for a guy that last year also similarly struggled with this team, a couple years removed from being that really interesting wild card piece of that bullpen in 2023. He's just been, Isaac, he's been one of the worst pitchers in baseball the last couple of years. And yet at this stage of the season, they're Marlins giving him yet another opportunity. And finally, these last couple games, especially today, went very smoothly. I don't know exactly what it is that they're looking for. I feel like it's too late for Soriano to change anybody's minds in terms of what his place on the team looks like beyond this season. But they've had some great relievers that have been blocked in the upper minors, so that somebody like Soriano can stay in here. And at least these last couple of games, he absolutely validated his spot on the roster.
Yeah, it's always been the slider that it's been what Miami has liked about this young guy. It's what made him really successful in 2023. But you mentioned the last 2 years, he has just been an awful relief pitcher, however way you slice it. And even his recent stretch of success that he has had over his last 4 games pitched, he's thrown 5 1/3 innings. He only allowed 1 earned run, but his FIP is 5.21. His ERA compared to his 1.69 ERA. I was very surprised that they did let him go out and try and close his game up. But I think recently they've seen something different with Soriano. I haven't been able to put a finger on it, and I'll have to ask for during the next homestand that the Mets come in town. But I can't understand how George Soriano has still been up here over guys like Josh White and Eknes and high leverage relievers that could definitely help this Marlins team finish across the finish line in the back end of the bullpen.
So now a quick check in on this wild card race and the scoreboard watching here. The Marlins today improved to 76 and 80. They are 4 games back of the Mets and now 4 games back of the Reds as well. The Mets and Reds are equally ahead of them as we head into this final week of the season. They're now tied with the Cardinals, and I think they own the tiebreaker against. We'll see. I think that tiebreaker is still to be determined. The Giants have pulled ahead late in their game. If they hold on to win these final couple innings, then they'll still be a game ahead of Miami. And the Diamondbacks very much in control of their game. If they win, they're still going to be 3 games ahead. It's not that the 4 games in 6 days isn't already a big obstacle, but the fact that all these teams are either even or ahead of the Marlins, that is why their playoff odds are as tiny as they were entering today at 0.1%. And I think even if you account for the results of today, that is barely budged at all. They need to realistically, they need to win out and get a little bit of help even beyond that. So if they win out, that would be taking the Mets out of the equation themselves. But also they need things go. They need the Reds to slip up. The Reds very improbably just pulled off a 4-game sweep of the Cubs.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to know these matchups, and in terms of trying to guess what's actually a hard series or an easy series at this stage of the season is totally impossible because the Mets just lost a series at home against the Nats. And any way you slice it, that's kind of in these small samples, absolutely anything can happen. But the thing is, the Marlins need so many things to happen simultaneously for them to actually pull this off.
Yeah, we'll have to see. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about the fact that it was reported by Mish earlier that, you know, Thomas White and Robbie Stanley, they're going to stay with AAA just to contribute to their playoff run, Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp's playoff run that begins on Tuesday. The Marlins could use them right now. They're having a playoff run of their own right now. Like, what the heck? Why are we prioritizing the AAA Jumbo Shrimp right now? I think if the Marlins were a little bit closer, maybe they have a different thought process with those 2 young studs. Maybe Snelling, they would have called them up to help them get across, but I think things are too unlikely to change any trajectory there.
Yes. And in both cases, just to be clear, those are guys not even on the 40-man roster. Right. That's one of those big factors
or
that
Josh White
into consideration. Josh White, a shutdown reliever. I'm pretty high on him, but it's same situation. Not even on the 40-man yet. As a look at who is on the 40-man heading down the stretch. And they're getting a couple reinforcements for this final week of the season. We talked enough about Eddie on the previous stream and the uncertainty about what's going to happen, but he's going to try to throw pitches in Philadelphia on Tuesday against the Phillies. He is being reinstated from the IL after having this relatively smooth ramp up from that elbow scare. We'll see what happens. The guy we didn't talk about last time was Conine. Griffin Conine seems all but, it hasn't been officially announced, but the expectation is that he's going to be rejoining the team in Philly on Tuesday. That's pretty poetic because that's the same place where he suffered the injury in the first place, Krawczyk. I think that is where he hurt himself on that slide in second base 5 months ago. A guy that was in those very first weeks of the season made such a positive impression on everybody. Looks like he was emerging as an everyday outfielder. And this team, they have a lot of outfield options. So it's might not necessarily feel the difference on the field in such a small sample, but for him to make it back with this team still alive without him, that's going to be, regardless of what other chaos goes on in this wild card chase, simply having him back for the final few games. I think that's got to be one of the more uplifting storylines for this final week.
Yeah, it's really great. Across the board, they've been getting guys back quicker than we thought they would. Connor Norby came back a little quicker than we thought he would. The fact that Ryan Weathers is out there pitching. We'll see about Edward Cabrera this week. And it's just great because even if he's not quite where he was back in April, just the fact that you can go into the offseason knowing, okay, the last game that I played, I was healthy and everything was feeling good, as opposed to the last time I was on a baseball field, I got hurt. The last time I was on a baseball field, something was wrong with my body. And then just sitting on that for the last 4 months plus 6 months of the offseason. That's the same with Ryan Weathers. Like the last pitch that I threw was the pitch that I got injured on. And then you just have to sit with that for 6 months over the winter. So just the fact that they'll be able to get some reps in before they go to the offseason. Also just the physical part of just you don't have to sit around for all that time. You can come in and play baseball for 2 or 3 weeks and then get your rest in. So I think just coming back, even if it's just for a week, would be incredible for him.
I'm curious to know who you guys think, with Derek Hill also expected to come back, Griffin Conine as well. Who are the corresponding moves?
It's a great question.
Well, my question is why they will feel the need to even bring back Hill. All
That's what
considered.
I say, but let's assume that let's start with Conine only. Who would be the corresponding move?
Let's see.
The thing
I
is,
think
they
it would
just
have to be Troy.
They have so many outfielders out there. Troy is basically it's funny. He's hitting almost as well as Conine was early in the season. Of course,
Yeah.
Conine is a better defender. There's a very big element to it, and
way more power.
I think Troy's played too well to be sent down. I understand why you bring it up because
Update today.
Both left-handed hitting corner outfielders and stuff. If you just go on merit, I mean, although he has had a couple nice offensive moments since coming back from his own injury, I feel like Dane Myers would be the one that is a little lower on the priority list at the moment. Or either him or it's
Weimer.
Both him and Weimer are in a very similar bucket where their defense is important, but it can be redundant to have both of them at the same time. Dane certainly has been a better player overall if you go back the last couple seasons, whereas Weimer wasn't even in the big leagues until about a month and a half ago. And I don't know how you split hairs between them.
I also thought maybe Navarreto, but I think they like him. I think they like having a third catching option. And he's been hitting a little bit. Honestly, he had a really productive sacrifice fly here in the 7th or 8th inning of today's ball game after having a single or the earlier innings. He's actually been hitting, so I don't know. I don't think he's an option anymore.
For so much of the season, these decisions have taken care of themselves because somebody else gets hurt right when somebody is about to come back. And now there's been some of that, but now you've had guys emerge where we started with Troy, and he's played a little too well for you to send him down, it feels like. And you can make the similar case for somebody like Weimer, who they didn't really expect much at all from when they brought him up. And yeah, man.
Maybe it depends on who they're like the matchups they have coming up pitching wise. They facing a lot of lefties. Maybe Troy's more expendable.
The next couple pitchers they'll face in Philly are going to be lefties. It's going to be Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo. So it would be a time where you'd think that those right-handed hitters between Weimer and Dane would be especially safe. Yeah, and utilized. So it could be that again would tilt the scales against Troy a little bit, given that Troy has been very strictly platooned. They just do not let him face lefties at all, even though he's done very well against righties. So maybe that's still a possibility, but it's a very good problem to have ultimately.
Yeah, that is word for word. Before Thursday's day game in Colorado, I asked Clayton off the right. I was like, you're gonna have really tough decisions to make with Hill and Conine, assuming they do reinstate Hill. Like, that's a great problem to have, Isaac. So they love to have this, and it just hasn't been an issue, like you said, Eli. It's sort of resolved itself, or over the last couple of years, not even just this season. But it'd be really unfortunate. I was thinking about it today because he was having a little bit of a tough day offensively. He has played so well, including that 2-home run game with the walk-off winner on Saturday, and just hitting a home run yesterday. He's been really hitting with power now with more confidence. He's hitting over 400 over his last 7 games. It would be really tough. And it would just show you the depth of this team, but it'd also be really tough at how really unfair this business can be, where you don't know how Core9's going to be. You could argue that Troy would be better than Core9 for this next week, but it's tough. It's a tough business.
Mm-hmm. And we should touch on this for people curious about Sandy in particular. We didn't know exactly how they were going to align this rotation, but Edward coming back pushes everybody else back a day, which means that Sandy, his start is going to come up against the Mets. Well, this is giving him at least an extra day of rest. In fact, over a full week of rest, Sandy is getting in this situation. But I think given the very loud possibility of them at least listening to trade offers in the offseason, they were doing it heading into the deadline. For whatever it's worth, I think ultimately, Krutchik, it makes sense to have him make a start at home. So if you really want to nitpick it, there's a scenario where you could have squeezed in 2 starts with him on Tuesday and then again on Sunday in the final game. They kind of split the difference here where he still starts at home and he starts a couple days earlier. So then Sunday, which means that I guess there's a slightly better possibility that the final game he pitches at home could still have playoff implications. If you wait all the way to game 162, the likelihood of that mattering one way or the other is a lot lower than if you bump it up a couple days. But I'm sure we'll get an explanation as it gets closer. But what do you make of where they landed on here with him making that final start of the season on his final start of the year on Friday at home?
Yeah, it's not really surprising. I mean, it would certainly be fun, and it's probably something I would do, especially if they were actually closer in the race. It doesn't surprise me, though, the Marlins wouldn't do this. I mean, this is the same group that a month ago didn't really want to pitch Ronnie Enriquez when they were even closer, or at least it felt a lot closer in the wild card race. They were pitching him like once a week or maybe twice a week if they were feeling crazy about it because he had already hit his innings limit and they wanted to see what they had in other guys. And even though they won't admit it, it reeked of feeling like the season's already over, so let's just develop guys. So it doesn't surprise me that the Marlins would say, let's just stick to the script. Let's stick to having Sandy go out there when he's supposed to go out there, not trying to squeeze him in any more than we have to. It's a very risk-averse group. So 4 games out with 6 games to play, I don't think it's close enough for them to feel risky.
Mm-hmm. So with Eddie, we don't think he's going to be fully stretched out for Tuesday. In his most recent sim game, he threw about 50 pitches, and usually the leap from one outing to the next is an extra 15 pitches or so. Again, we'll get confirmation of that before that game, but likely with Cabrera looking at 65-ish pitches, maybe 70 if things go right, but they'll still need a whole lot of bullpen involvement in that. And we mentioned earlier on the show about Ryan Weathers recently coming back from his injury. So that will be his final start of the regular season to head into the offseason feeling good about himself. And then Jansen Junk, he was the pioneer of the coach pitch calling method, and that went very well for him. So now we'll see what he does in his encore from that. One final quick overview of this series against the Rangers. This was, I think, they'd only played once at this ballpark before, and I believe they got swept when they were here a couple of years ago.
It was when they were actually in a playoff race, and it was like the low point of that season where we were wondering if they were going to blow it.
Yeah, and it's funny that I actually remember a couple guys right in the middle of that sweep, including Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers made his Marlins debut at this ballpark against the Rangers, and it went really poorly. And I also remember, I think George Soriano started a game there, and then Ryan Weathers came in relief of him, and they both kind of screwed up, but especially Weathers. And that was some things remain the same and some things completely different this time around, where I think the Rangers, if not officially, they're right on the verge of being eliminated officially from American League postseason contention. So that is, nobody would have seen that coming. The fact that the Rangers are officially out of it before the Marlins are officially out of it in their league.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, a lot will be said over the next couple of days, but it's very impressive that this team has 76 wins still with a week to go. They blew Vegas out of the water, as Clayton McCullough pointed out to us, in terms of their predicted win total. They blew us out of the water. Was it Kevin that was the most optimistic in our preseason predictions? He had the Marlins at like 68 wins or something, and that was like the highest win total that we had on our staff. So it's really impressive. It's really crazy, and I mean, it could be a very, very fun week in Philadelphia, knowing that you get to come home and play probably your biggest rival. Especially, I feel like the Mets are also, at least for me, more of a rivalry when it's in Miami, just because you have the added annoyance of Mets fans at Lone Depot. And then if you put yourself in the right situation, speaking of Sandy being lined up a certain way, I mean, what an electric way to come home if you do take care of business this week, that when you come home, it's Sandy on the mound on Friday.
Absolutely. And things, as people are aware, Sandy's been going in a very positive direction, especially over these last month and a half or so. So his overall, it's going to be fascinating to think about how people look back on Sandy's season years down the road, where they see an ERA well over 5, and they see that he allowed the overall numbers are really underwhelming. But when you're inside of it, we know that it's just been such a roller coaster, where it was as bad as it could possibly be the first couple months. Then there were signs of life. Then he slipped back. Then he heated up right before the trade deadline, and then he didn't get moved. And then another hot streak towards the end of the season, in a way that I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, but you feel a lot more encouraged about him as a pitcher moving forward than the overall season numbers would suggest, just because of all the tangible things that have gone right as this year has has progressed. Am I making a trip for that final series? Probably not. I can't imagine a scenario where the thing is, I remember thinking 2 years ago that I would come down if the Marlins had somehow gone through the wild card series and gone to the division series, hosted a game at Lone Depot. Probably the same mindset this time around, that if ever was playoff baseball in Miami, I would make it a point to come down and cover some of that. But we're still a bunch of steps away from that even happening. So we'll see. But as of this moment, don't have any flights booked for that.
Not yet. Still a long way to go to that. We got to get through Philadelphia. Remember last time the Marlins went to Philadelphia with something to play for. So let's get through that, and then we can discuss flight bookings. You've got like seven different options for where to stay when you're down here.
Yes, that is not an issue. Not an issue whatsoever. Thanks to you guys. A look at the remaining schedule for this upcoming final week. Each of these teams pretty similar setup. We're playing 2 series. Marlins on the road against the Phillies and at home against the Mets. The thing is, they need to keep in mind, even though they're at the top of that wild card 3 standings, it's the Mets and the Reds. They still need to outplay the Diamondbacks and the Giants and the Cardinals. The Giants and the Cardinals play against each other at one point, and then of course that final series is single-handedly they'll be able to pull things back against the Mets. But trying to size up these series, pretty impossible at this time of year. On paper, it looks like the Reds are in a great spot. The Reds own the tiebreaker against the Mets in case they finish with the same record. And in this next series, the Reds are hosting the Pirates, who clearly have nothing left to play for at this point. I think Paul Skeens is going to pitch during that series, for one variable that works in Pittsburgh's favor. And then that final series, from the Reds' perspective, they're on the road against the Brewers. Again, on paper, that looks like promising from the Marlins' perspective, but the Brewers are not really going to have anything left to play for at that point. They officially clinched their division today, and I believe they're on the cusp of clinching a bye through the wild card series, which means that it's just not really that imposing, even if they have a roster that has done so well for most of the season. And the Cubs are right in the middle of this. And I'm bringing that up because the Cubs were the ones that have allowed the Reds to leapfrog everybody in this race. The Cubs just got swept by the Reds in a 4-game series, and now it's the Cubs against the Mets for these next few. It goes without saying the Marlins need the Cubs to win that series against the Mets. The elimination number is 3 for the Marlins. That's the combination of Mets wins, Reds wins, and Marlins losses that could officially end this. So they need the Pirates to win that Red series. They need the Cubs to win that Mets series. And the Marlins themselves, they absolutely need to win the Phillies series too, right here. I've mentioned it before that for those dreaming of another perfect week to finish this off, that'd be unprecedented in Marlins history. They've never had a winning streak of more than 9 in a row. They're currently riding a 6-game streak. Yeah, 6 in a row. And so if they tied that together with another 6 games, that'd be 12. It's just so far and beyond anything that this franchise has given their fans at any point, even on years where they've won the World Series, even on years where they've had deeper rosters than they've had right now. They haven't quite had that Cinderella run where things go perfectly over the span of a couple weeks. But that might be what it's going to take. They'll need to do that and get a little bit of help. So I've been putting up scenarios. I'll tweet out another one heading into Tuesday in terms of all the records that each of these teams need to put up in order for the Marlins to get in there. The bottom line is they need to be pretty much perfect and get a little bit of help. So they've gotten enough to stay in the race. And ultimately, it speaks to this system that we're in. The fact that a team that is under 500 is even alive here. That says more about the system than it does about the Marlins being a true playoff contender ahead of schedule. It's ridiculous, even compared to last year. Last year, it took like 87 wins to get in as the final wild card spot in the National League. And this year it might only take 82 or 83 to do so. So that it's just a few games, but that's a pretty big difference. It's the difference between being an average team and being a playoff team might not even be any difference this year. It might be one and the same, that you can get in as a totally average team.
It's weird because they're definitely not ahead of schedule. They're definitely an average team. Depending on the week, they're even a below average team. But like when they are playing well, it's similar to 2023, where I do feel like, I don't know. So they would right now, if they made it to the 3rd wild card spot, they'd be playing Milwaukee. I mean, this is dangerous because I said the same thing about Philly 2 years ago, but like, do we not think the Marlins could win 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee? I mean, I guess in those 3-game sample sizes, you could easily get swept out of Milwaukee as well. But like, I think the Marlins could do well against Milwaukee. I think you would just have to somehow hit that pitching that they have.
In terms of when in MLB history there have been teams like this, so relying on rookies and young guys while still being competitive, in Marlins history, it hasn't really been quite like this because the 97 team was very experienced and very well compensated. And the 2003 team was on the younger side, but not as extreme as this particular team is. Yeah, in terms of the obvious parallel is 2006, a team that is trending towards having basically an identical record to this team. In 2006, the Marlins had 0 expectations. They were even more dependent on rookies than this team. Hanley and Ugla and Anibal Sanchez. I think Chris Volstad came up that year. It was overwhelmingly young in 2006. And that team ended up winning 78 games, which is almost exactly what the Marlins are in line for. And that was in an era where there was 2 less wildcard spots. There's only 1 wildcard spot in the National League that year. So they weren't really competing for anything in the final couple weeks of the season. But that's the closest parallel if you take all the other factors out of here. In terms of whether can Stowers come back, no. Stowers is done for at least the next week for this regular season. If they were to, I don't think he's doing any baseball activities at all right now. So even if they were to sneak into the postseason, it seems unlikely. They have not said he's officially shut down. He's traveling with the team, seems to be in a good mood, and it is only an oblique strain. It's the type of thing where I would think at this point he is close to being recovered, but then it's just about the ramp up period to get all the way back to hitting again and being competitive against live pitching. That's a long enough process where they won't even have the opportunity to do rehab games because the AAA regular season just ended today. They start playoffs next week. So Stowers he's definitely done for this final week stretch. So then the question is whether he would actually be around if they somehow, some way extend their season. As we touched on, they have a whole lot of good outfield options anyway, where I've seen other complaints about, woe is us, how unlucky we are that Stowers went down when he did and missed this much time. The outfield hasn't really been a problem. They have a whole lot of contributions from Heriberto Hernandez, of all people, has become really reliable. Jacob Marcy, most of all, and most obviously, he's been awesome. It's been a different shape of production, but Jacob Marcy on a per game basis has been as valuable as Stowers was when Stowers was healthy. So as much as great as it would be to have everybody healthy at the same time, that's not realistic, and other teams aren't in that situation as well. In case you missed it on Conine, yeah, we think he is back on Tuesday. We think he is back for the next game, that he's played 9 rehab games. He crushed it in AAA, both in terms of the results and the underlying batted ball data. He looks fully ready to go. So yeah, the question is who goes down for him, and we're not entirely sure. Thank you to Richard for keeping eyes on the live scoreboard. So that means the Giants are still a game ahead of the Marlins heading into this final week of the season. And we do have the upcoming schedule up right there. So the Giants, again, on paper, they finish off the year as generously as they possibly could against that Rockies team, hosting the historically bad Rockies. And then right before that, playing against the Cardinals. So essentially, whoever wins that Cardinals-Giants series is going to take the other out of wild card consideration.
Yeah, and going back to the outfield conversation before, I said this earlier in the year, and I wound up being right about it. In spring training, the first thing I noticed was like there's a lot of depth in this lineup, especially in the outfield. I even said like the roster is full of fourth outfielders, which sounds like an insult, but it's not. The reason they're still in it is, yeah, they're obviously getting great contributions from guys like Augustin Ramirez and some of the pitching that has come alive, like Jansen Junk and the season that Edward Cabrera had. A lot of why they're still in it despite all these injuries is because they're very deep right now. Like they don't have a lot of stars. Augustin Ramirez had a great first month that was getting a lot of national buzz. Kyle Stowers would have been a star this year if he played in a different market. But other than that, like, not really a lot of stars. What they do have are a bunch of guys that are, if we were playing MLB The Show, you would have a bunch of outfielders that are like 78 or 79 overall. Whereas in the past, you would have guys that were like 85, but then coming off your bench was a guy who was like a 60. And now, like, it seems like to an extent, like if someone gets hurt, it's an issue, but it's not a huge issue because whoever's coming off your bench is going to be able to deliver almost the same results. Like you were even saying it before, you were alluding to, Troy is doing as good as Griffin Conine was before he got hurt. And that's because Troy is another depth piece. Like, is he an all-star? No, not by any means, but he's very good. And so when you are 2 deep or 3 deep organizationally at each position, you stay in the race, even when you are decimated with injuries. Like, it's crazy. If this was any other year, you would be saying that we're decimated with injuries. But it just feels kind of fine right now. Not ideal, but fine.
And other people have mentioned this before. In fact, a couple back-to-back about all the lefties in the outfield. So we'll see how that goes. Ultimately, the point is if these lefty guys can actually hit lefty pitching, then it's fine. And one of the big storylines early in the year was Stowers doing surprisingly well against lefties. Marcy, to this point, has been the same. That was one of my big questions when Marcy got called up and why I was a little reluctant to say he's definitely an everyday guy, because he didn't really hit lefties that well in the minors each of the last 2 years. But then all of a sudden, in a small sample in the big leagues, he's doing just fine. It's almost identical, regardless of what handedness he's facing. Ultimately, you need a lot of time to find out whether a guy can hit lefties or not, but so far, so good. And then Conine is the one that I'm also pretty concerned about how that looks against lefties over a big sample. Ultimately, it's not that big a deal when, as you said, they have all these other guys that you can platoon with. It really is. It's not going to be a situation realistically where they have these 3 guys playing every single day and getting every at bat. They're going to continue to, under this coaching staff, and with the expectation that basically everybody on this coaching staff comes back, they love mixing and matching. They love platooning. There were times when Stowers was in the middle of his hottest stretches, and they still sat him against a lefty, and people were upset. But then whoever was in place of him that day did just fine. And I believe they set a franchise record this year for pinch hit home runs. When they push buttons late in games to get guys a platoon advantage, it works a lot of the time. It doesn't work every time. It works a lot more often than we're used to seeing. And so some of that credit goes to what they're willing to do. It goes to the players that they don't have huge egos about this sort of thing, where they're willing to sit, understanding that the guy playing in their spot is there for a reason, to take advantage of a certain matchup. That's going to be part of what this team does moving forward, trying to optimize all these matchups in a way that, as long as you get buy-in from the players, and it's easy to get buy-in from the players when they're early in their careers, when they haven't had a ton of experience before, and they're just grateful to be in the big leagues. When that happens, you get good results like this. And it's kind of similar to the magical run that the Detroit Tigers went on last year, where they had a lot of hitters that nobody knew about, and a lot of those guys exceeded expectations. So the Marlins have done a lot of the same stuff this year in that regard, and they're still going to need a lot of guys again on the outfield front. Somebody brings up Kemp Alderman, and he has as much power as any of these guys. He's knocking on the door. He'll be in big league spring training. He's a right-handed hitter. Yeah, they're not going to keep Kemp Alderman in the minors all year just because they have these lefties in front of him. They're going to mix him into the equation. They're going to blend him with those lefties in order to have a more complete unit. It's it's the depth they have is something that is totally different, even from a couple years ago, even from 2023. When we looked at that organization, as much as people were celebrating the playoff run, that team just did not have the kind of depth knocking on the door, and it didn't even have the depth on the active roster. There were guys on that active roster who were dragging the team down even as they were getting into the postseason. And now it's a much brighter outlook, even if their record this year is going to be a little bit worse than that year's team.
Yep, it's a small one because home runs aren't everything, obviously, but like this team also leads the majors in pinch hit home runs. I know it's just one stat, so it doesn't say everything, but like just the fact that you can plug and play guys. I have this take all the time, so people are probably bored of me saying it, but like there's just not a single rally killer in this lineup usually. I mean, there's weeks where you do have enough injuries to where like certain guys are getting at bats maybe they shouldn't be getting, but for the most part, like everyone who played today, for example, was great, and I would trust them in a rally. Really, no rally killers, no guys that are dragging the team down, and that's a lot of people again think that you need stars to make the playoffs. You might need stars to win a World Series, but in order to make the playoffs, you just need as many not terrible guys as possible.
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Get rid of the not terrible guys, and they've done so this year. One final look at the series predictions from this past series that we made. It was a mixed bag between guys going with the Marlins and not surprisingly a number of people willing to foreseeing that the Marlins were going to sweep yet another series right there. So we appreciate all those series predictions. Let me just pull up just a quick overview of the Phillies as entering this penultimate series of the regular season in Philadelphia at Citizens Bank Park. Final matchup between these division rivals, where the Phillies have already officially clinched the division. Not a whole lot to play for at this point, but still playing relatively well. And so we're anticipating that Conine is going to be on this list by the start of the series. As for the Phillies, I don't know if Harrison Bader was on the team the last time these teams played, or maybe he was. I think he was when they met in Miami. But
yeah, remember he was one that hit the home run, and the dad and the lady fought over the ball.
That's right. He was right in the middle of that. Good memory on that. Yes. Otherwise, a lot of familiar faces that have been with the Phillies for a long time at this point. They're just playing for playoff seeding, trying to get that first round bye straight into the divisional series if they're able to do so. Yeah, it's never easy against them. They are missing Trey Turner, who will still be out. I think he got hurt during that previous series against the Marlins, if I do remember that correctly. And so he has been out ever since then and is expected to miss the rest of their regular season. So that is one guy out, but Harrison Bader's done a pretty good Trey Turner impression, even if they play different positions. So it's going to be, again, on paper, that doesn't really mean anything at this time of year, but the seen most of the pitching matchups for this one, where the Marlins are going to be putting out Eddie, Ryan Weathers, Jansen Junk, the Phillies, Christopher Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo, and then we'll see what they do on Thursday. So with that, just want to see if we have any other interesting comments that I want to touch on. Yeah, that's the best case scenario. That's essentially what they need. At an absolute minimum, need to take 2 out of 3 to stay alive. Who's the tiebreaker between the Phillies and the Brewers? That I do not actually know. I can look it up really quickly between them. But those are the two teams that between them. The Brewers have that tiebreaker, for anybody wondering.
So mathematically, are we rooting for the Mets to be 1 game better than the Reds this week so that the Marlins control their own destiny? Because ideally, you want the Mets to be the 3rd wild card and for the Marlins to be within 3 games of them so that you can control your own destiny going into the final weekend.
Yes, that's what you're hoping for, and we'll see if they ultimately get it. So the Marlins do have the tiebreaker over the Reds, for anybody wondering, based on the season series. And they're essentially in the same spot because with the Mets, the Marlins are going to have the tiebreaker over them if they beat them in this final series. That tiebreaker is going to be determined by whoever wins at least 2 out of 3 in this final weekend between those two. It is still just appalling. And we've seen it before. We've seen it a bunch of times with the Mets in particular, but I can't believe they're doing it again. They've done it a handful of times just over the last 20 years where they're comfortably above 500 in playoff position for most of the year, and then all falls apart at the very end. It is inexplicable. It is in their DNA, and that it is one of the more unique fan experiences in baseball for people to root for the Mets, where they're like now almost 40 years removed from a World Series title, but they're rarely awful. I don't think they've ever in that period lost 100 games like the Marlins did just last year. So they're always somewhere in between being mediocre and then being just not good enough to get where they ultimately want to go. And
I think that makes it worse. That makes it so much worse. Like, if you know your team's going to be bad, you can mentally prepare yourself for it. But they're good. Like, they're usually a good team. And they just, that's why last year, too, when they went into that final game, it was a doubleheader, and they needed to just win one of those games against Atlanta. You remember that? I thought that them actually winning a game was equivalent to the miracle on ice because I was so certain. Because everyone was saying, the Braves only have to win one as well. Both teams only have to win one. So you don't really have to try. And I thought this is exactly the kind of day where Atlanta just wins both games just for the hell of it, and the Mets don't get anything. And they did it. And I thought that meant that this was a different franchise now with Steve Cohen at the helm. But I guess not. We'll see.
Simply what they did in October itself felt like a turning of the page, where the fact that even if they fell short of even making the World Series, that was such a likable postseason run. And I thought that alone, it was suggesting that something was different this time around. And nope. They, over the offseason, they're winners of the offseason, and yet somehow take a slight step back. The Mets will Mets, as LMF says.
Yes, they will. That's why it was so frustrating to watch the Marlins just put in Josh Simpson a month ago in Cleveland. And some people were saying, well, they're probably not going to make the playoffs anyway. And it's like, have you seen who's in front of them right now? Have you seen who the 3rd wild card team is? Like, you got to pitch every game like it's game 7 because you could make up 6 games if you really want to.
Bringing up that example is that's also a refrain I've seen from people just in the last few days, kicking themselves over the fact that there were those moments, several of those type of moments where in high leverage situations, underqualified players, or at the very least inexperienced players, would put in those situations and ended up losing them a bunch of games throughout the entire month of August. If you get a few of those games back, then it's an entirely different outlook. If you just switch a few of those results, then they're essentially tied with the Reds and the Mets at this stage, not really chasing anybody. Maybe they'd be controlling their own destiny at this point. And I've kind of pushed back on that. That's part of the reality of being a team in this situation, of not having it's a relatively short list of guys that you can unequivocally trust. There are times earlier in the year, there have been times since then where they've made unusual decisions that have actually worked out. I referenced George Soriano earlier in this show. The fact that George Soriano pitched high leverage spots in 2 of the 3 games of the series, it worked out fine. You don't really hear any chirping after that, but that's kind of in the same vein of the kind of move where even you remember the ones very vividly that don't work out, but that is just that's part of the reality of a team in this situation where realistically they have not put their best possible roster in the big leagues this year. That's part of the longer term plan. They're being patient with some of their other prospects. Robbie Snelling could help this pitching staff right now, but they need to have a longer term view because this year is never the year that they were going to push all their chips into the center of the table, and they want to spread that around. In the meantime, you take some lumps along the way. There are things that you could overcome some of those mistakes if you had better production from other facets of the roster. So I can't believe people are actually dwelling on that type of stuff in a season like this. The fact that they're in this situation is kind of a realistic best case scenario. You could pick apart the most disappointing losses all you want, but in the aggregate, the fact that it's going this well, that continues to be top of mind for me. That the fact that they're in this situation kind of blows my mind, and I got to give them credit to that. We picked them apart in the moment when they screwed up those games, but I don't think it is something that people should still cling on to when they're actually still playing meaningful games in the final week of the season.
Yeah, I'll give them credit. I remember like a couple weeks later, there were a few high leverage arms that were down against Atlanta back at home, and Clayton McCullough put out Tyler Zuber and Josh Simpson late, and I forget how many runs the Marlins were up. I think they were up by 1 because I think it was like the first time Tyler Zuber had pitched while up by 1 run since like 2021 or something, and it worked out. So some of these moves work out. Yeah, we don't have to do the debate show, especially a month after the fact, but my opinion on it is, yes, stick with your development plan in terms of guys that are on the roster. Like, don't be buyers at the deadline. Don't call up Robbie Snelling if you feel like he's not where you wanted him to be at the time of his call up. But for the guys that are on the roster, use them. Ronnie Enriquez had only pitched 1 time that week. So it's just stuff like that. And I feel like over the course of a 162 game season, there will be moments where Josh Simpson will naturally get development opportunities like that. It felt forced to do it in that moment. But again, we don't have to do the debate show a month later. They, in the aggregate, like you said, still a very impressive season that they've had. 76 wins, and they've still got 6 games left to go. They could finish over 500, even if they miss the playoffs. That's crazy. And then one more thing on this particular thought is it is crazy how over the course of 162 games, like every game is going to wind up mattering. Like some stupid game on a Tuesday night in April is probably going to wind up mattering. If not for the Marlins, then for the Mets or for the Reds. Like every game matters even when it feels like it doesn't.
With that said, we are going to go to the final segment here. It is prediction time.
This is prediction time.
I think we're going to win a lot of games, a lot more games than you think we're going to win this year.
Good on you, Bruce. They are now 13 games up, 14 wins up from where they were last season, still with another week to go. Throughout the entire season, we've been making serious predictions. Our staff, super subs, live stream guests, how many games the Marlins are going to win, who will be the series MVP as determined by win probability added. 2 series left, and you referenced it with the 162 game schedule. I guess it translates to prediction time as well. This is 50 series into the season, and there's a tie for first place between our own staffer, Hector Rodriguez, our super sub, Alec Chow, who goes by Rings. They are tied at 64 points apiece. It's almost certainly going to come down to them down the stretch and who they predict. But we keep the doors open to anybody that wants to share their takes with us. You can do it on fishonfirst.com. You can do it in the Marlins Discord server. And the rest of my staff has been giving predictions as the year goes on as well. So this is what it comes down to. We've laid out still 2 days ahead of the series opener. So there could be some surprises with the roster moves along the way. But switching up this live stream scheduling overall, I think has been a net win. And so we're going to blindly make some predictions without entirely knowing all the info that's going to go along here. If Krutchik, you're ready, I will cue you up and give us your thoughts for this Marlins Phillies series.
Okay. I think going to Citizens Bank Park means that you're going to have to win with the long ball. I have the Marlins winning 2 out of 3. I don't think they get the sweep done. I think they make next weekend very interesting. I think Augustin Ramirez is your series MVP.
Man, I will be the Debbie Downer here. I'll say that the Marlins fall out of realistic wild card contention over these next few days, end up losing the series. Enough things go wrong on the other end that they're out of it heading into the final weekend. I'm doing this to obviously reverse jinx them into pulling it out and keeping this going, but I have them losing 2 out of 3 to the Phillies. A whole lot of good talent on this roster, and they've done better more often than not. They've been able to cobble things together to optimize it and pull out a lot of close games. But I think this is when things catch up with them compared to where they had been the previous week. They end up winning 1 game in this series. Maybe it's the Ryan Weathers start right in the middle there, but end up losing the opener in the series finale in Philly. Who's going to be the one mainly responsible for them losing the series? I will go with Bryson Stott. How about him coming up with a couple key hits? He was the one that, of course, was right in the middle 2 years ago of knocking the Marlins out of the wild card series when he hit that grand slam in the postseason. I think he's going to have a couple surprising extra base hits over the course of the next few days that ultimately make the difference here. But I hope I'm wrong, and we'll find out. The fact that they're in this situation is ultimately a shock to me, and I've had a pretty bad year when it comes to making serious predictions. So if that's any consolation, this is probably going to continue the trend of me misfiring on my picks. That's Fish on First Live, presented by About the Fans. Use promo code FOF10 at checkout to save 10%. Might be wrong. Almost certainly going to be wrong, Brian. But we'll see how it plays out over these next couple of days. So next stream will come up at the end of the Phillies series. We'll probably be joined by our special Phillies correspondent, Alex Carr. That'll be a fun one. A ton of coverage between now and then on fishonfirst.com and wherever you find our stuff. So thank you for the support all season long. And I'm glad for everybody's sake that there's been this shocking plot twist heading into the final week of the season that keeps the team relevant. But we have you all covered at all levels of the organization at FOF, and we'll talk to you again soon on the next show. So peace out. Go Fish.
Fish on First Live is presented by About the Fans. We've partnered with them this season on a brand new merchandise collection featuring t-shirts, polos, hats, and other accessories that Marlins fans will absolutely love. Head on over to aboutthefans.com to shop the FOF collection. Use our special coupon code FOF10 to save 10% off your order. Enter code FOF10 at checkout to save 10% and continue supporting what we do over here.